2021, as well as our first capital improvement plan workshop. We are going to get underway with both of those momentarily. I apologize for the delay, as we had a couple items that we needed to address before we came out this evening. Just so everybody will know, we will actually formally start the Board of Commissioners meeting. There was just one police item on the agenda, which we are going to then move to table for our next board meeting on July 7th. And then we will go into the capital improvement plan workshop. And if we do have enough time, it's my thought to entertain motions to trade Ben Simmons. But with that, we will first start with, if you would all be so kind as to rise for the pledge and call to order our special Board of Commissioners meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Madam Secretary, would you be so kind as to call the roll?
Mr. President, Mr. McKeon is asked to be excused. Mr. Churchill.
Here.
Mr. Courtney.
Present.
Ms. Durbin.
Here.
Mr. Gavin.
Present.
Mr. Grimes. Here. Ms. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. McComb.
Here.
Ms. O'Neill.
Present.
Mr. Sinai.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Present.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Mr. Zellow.
Here.
Mr. Bernheim.
Present.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. With that, as I stated, there was one police item which was on our agenda, and I am going to move that particular matter be tabled until our next board meeting, which will be a special board meeting on July 7th. Second to that, thank you, Commissioner Courtney. All those in favor, please raise your hand indicating your approval. Any objections? Seeing none, the matter is so tabled. I thank you all for permitting the formalities, and the special Board of Commissioners meeting is hereby adjourned. That then brings us to our capital improvement plan workshop, and we'll call on its co-chair, Commissioner Zella.
Thank you very much, President Bernheim. Tonight is our annual capital budget workshop. We typically do this late in the month of June. And then early in September, we will have our operating budget workshop. This is part of our annual and important steps in our proven and reliable budget process. Tonight's a workshop format, and so we won't be voting. There is no plan for public comment. Of course, members of the public can always contact their commissioner or any commissioner with any comments or opinions that they have. The 6-year capital plan that we have is the first year is a budget. So tonight we'll be talking about the 2022 budget. And at the end of the year, we'll be voting on that, and that becomes a committed budget. And then the next 5 years are a plan. This plan would go out through 2027, the 5 years of 2023 through 2027. So this is really a 6-year capital plan, budget and plan. And we do a better job than just about every other municipality and better than a number of counties. We really do plan well for capital spending. We're getting a little bit of a late start, but I'd like to set a goal of finishing by 9:30 tonight. I was hoping to set a goal of finishing by 9 had we gotten started on time. And by the way, if we finish early, that's, we should not hesitate to do so. Our Public Works Director, who will be doing a lot of this speaking tonight, does have an early morning engagement that is not township business. And so if nothing else, to work with him, I think that would be beneficial for all. There is a substantial list that's been proposed by management for 2022, in large part because we know we delayed due to the pandemic delays in 2020 capital spending. And of course, those delays flowed through into 2021, and some have flowed through out now into 2022. After our manager and our chief financial officer and our Public Works Director make their presentations, I'd ask that commissioners hold their questions until after each one makes their presentation. And I also want to thank the staff for continuing to make improvements to how the complex and very busy capital program that we have is presented to us. And with that, I'll ask our township manager to make his opening remark.
Thank you, Commissioner Zelloff. As the commissioner said, the capital improvement plan under discussion tonight covers a 6-year period, with only 2022 being an actual budget granting spending authority. The remaining 5 years are a plan. But this workshop only represents the start of the CIP process with the Board of Commissioners. Staff's been working on this for some time. We conduct this CIP workshop to assist the board to establish priorities for infrastructure maintenance or improvement projects that are desired. We do it as a special meeting so the CIP doesn't get lost or mixed up with the discussion of the overall operating budget, and because it really is an important process that needs to accurately reflect the priorities of the board and the community. As I noted in a cover memo, the township has assets with an accounting value of over $250 million, and that's likely understated. How all these facilities are maintained and how much debt is incurred to take care of them goes directly to the quality of life in the community. Normally, the CIP is financed with debt plus contributions from grant programs and, in the case of our paving, utility contributions. The CIP and the next several years are unusual now because of financing from some projects can come from the proceeds of the Federal American Rescue Program, which proceeds between 21 and 22 for the township will come to around $25.5 million. As I also explained in a separate memo, the funds can be used for several purposes, but they gain the greatest flexibility if we can claim them as lost revenue due to the pandemic. They can then be reallocated for the capital needs the board might decide in future years. So using the formula that's approved by the Treasury, the township, in 2021, out of the $12.75 million we've already received, we can actually claim around $12.6 million in lost revenue. And that money basically becomes flexible that the board is able to use for either operating purposes or for capital needs. And you can use it in any combination. So you gain that flexibility by calling it lost revenue. The picture, however, becomes even more uncertain in the second allocation of $12.75 million, because that'll be received in 2022, and to a great extent, it depends on how the township's budget in 2021 fares. So thanks to this unusual formula that the Treasury has put out for claiming lost revenue, a very positive revenue performance in 2021 could sharply limit the amount of money we can claim as lost revenue out of the second half of the ARP money. So the best thing we can do is recognize that we have time here. While we're going to receive these funds in 21 and 22, the township has until 2024 to fully allocate the funds, and you have until 2026 to actually spend them. So it's really recommended that the board try to decide how to try to decide how to allocate all the ARP funds at this juncture, but rather only begin to plan to use some of the ARP funds as needed for finishing up 2021 CIP projects or for 2022 projects once we decide what that's going to be. A more complete discussion really ought to be left until the fall, when we're in the full budget discussion and when we have a better picture of how 2021 is going to come out. So the township has a debt policy that appropriately indicates that debt considerations will be made with the objective of protecting the township's AAA bond rating. That policy has to be balanced with the need to maintain the township's vast infrastructure that I mentioned. The cash flow plan that the board is going to see tonight when we let our Chief Financial Officer speak, basically shows borrowing 8.8 million for a 13.6 capital improvement plan. That would not increase the township's total debt. The township's total debt was substantially decreased in 2021 when we didn't borrow any money and paid off $8.8 million worth of debt. So we're already well ahead of the game, which I'm sure Eric or Chris will talk more about in a minute. So final decisions are not made at this workshop. It's designed to provide staff with direction to help us prepare a proposed CIP for your consideration in the fall and ultimate adoption by the end of the year. The $13.6 million draft CIP that you're going to hear Paul go over tonight includes many projects which Commissioner Zeloff mentioned were pushed out of 2020 and pushed into 21, and that then pushed other projects into 22. So some of this is a catch up to the delayed projects that we have had. But direction tonight is really sought from the board on several matters. And the questions really are the projects in the draft CIP that you're about to go over, the ones you want in there? Are there projects that are in there that should be delayed? Are there projects that are not in there or on the list of possible projects you want included? That's the kind of direction that the staff really needs now. So we can go to work over the summer months, refine all the numbers, get a better idea of how our current 2021 CIP spending is going, and come back to you with a draft in the fall. The draft you're looking at tonight has already been worked on by management staff, and the projects have been evaluated based on need and how fast they can realistically be designed, bid, and implemented, because that, of course, affects how much financing we need in 2022. Finally, for informational purposes, the board's packet has a committee working on sidewalks. And so we kind of carved out in the packet, and you're perhaps wondering why you had a sort of a list of sidewalk projects. Well, we're working on a sidewalk plan, and we just wanted to call to your attention the amount of sidewalk work over the next couple of years, which really total $2.7 million over the next couple of years you have in the current CIP. So I hope this process is helpful tonight, and hopefully we can get good direction from you and come back with a document you're really happy with in the fall. That, I would say thank you. I can answer any questions, but I know we probably want to get to our Chief Financial Officer, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thanks very much, Ernie. And if the board's okay, I'd like to go right to our CFO, Eric Traub, and he's assisted by Chris Weldy tonight. And of course, if there are any questions for Eric or Ernie, we can do so after Eric's presentation. Eric, I see you there. Thanks. And I would ask everybody, I believe, Eric, you want everybody to turn to page 29, which is the capital fund cash flow. So Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zeloff, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to kind of go quickly through just one piece of this here tonight, and then kind of tag team things with Mr. Weldy moving forward. I believe the page that Commissioner Zeloff referenced is the one with the heading Capital Projects Cash Flow. I think many on the board have kind of seen this over the last few years. The preceding pages kind of show you just township dollars spent or projected to be spent by project, by each category, administration, circulation, et cetera. The preceding page immediately to this one totals all of them up by the A, B, and C projects, the ones that we definitely think should go ahead, the ones for board consideration, and ones that are probably in the out years or we're waiting upon grant funding for in the C category. And then this gives you kind of a look at how much money we have still to spend on capital projects, what other monies are going to be coming in, what other expenditures are we expecting throughout the year? And as we look forward to next year, what does all that mean? And then what does that mean for potential future debt issuance? So I'm going to walk through this really quickly. Then Mr. Weldy is going to talk about the township's current debt levels and kind of where they've been historically and where we're sitting right now. And then we'll open it up for any questions you guys might have. So when you're looking at this capital projects cash flow, and I'm going to try to let me share my screen here as well. I think you should be seeing it now. And then, so we start with how much money we have on hand, which is about $7.3 million right now. We've made a rough assumption. Everything's kind of a rough draft right now of a small amount of an ARP contribution for this year. And we always generally have additional funding, a lot of it from utility companies throughout the rest of the year. So we're looking at, as of June 1st, what we're anticipating is around $9.2 million, to be spent the rest of this year. In projected spending, myself and Mr. McElhaney looked at this. Right now, where we're thinking, based upon the projects, is a net township spend of about $8 million the rest of this year. So this also includes the reason I say net project spend. So projects like the Pennswood Bridge, where we spend the money and then get reimbursements back for the federal and state. This is just a net spend. Same thing with our paving program. So we had about a $1.7 million contract. Some of that is going to be funded by liquid fuel. So we're just showing the net spend right here for 2021. So that basically leaves you with an ending balance of this year of about $1.2 million. We always have contingencies about whether we spend that slower or faster. We have been spending a little bit faster than normal for us, but we'll have to see how the rest of the year runs. Since we have been spending a little bit quicker, we kind of programmed the next year here to flow right off that $1.2 million number. And what you'll see for 2022 is basically we're anticipating about $800,000 in liquid fuels. Again, when you see the rotomilling and paving contract, you'll see that on the circulation page. You'll see that's in there at $1.5 million. That's total township funds. And then we'll have about $800,000 from the state. So the net that might have to be potentially borrowed for would be about $700,000. The ARP contribution, again, that's a rough draft, is going to be discretionary up to the board as we go through our processes. And then the other funding sources, again, a lot of that's utility money and grants. So that basically gives us about $4.8 million. And then this 13.646, this comes immediately from the preceding page in your packet. That's what's listed in the A projects right now. So again, it's a rough total. It's subject to all the board discussions that'll happen as we go through the evening. And then that basically leaves you the negative 8.8 is money that would need to be found. And how that would be found is either we're increasing the amount from the ARP, we're increasing allocations from liquid fuels, using reserves. But mainly what we're talking about there, which Ernie alluded to earlier, is talking about issuing debt. We are planning the likelihood that we'd have to issue debt sometime in the first quarter of 2022. That's subject to change based upon decisions as we go forward with the ARP. So if it was the board's discretion to use more of the ARP dollars, that could change the timing. But again, it's really up to the process that we go through over the next several months. So that's kind of a rough breakdown of where we are financially from a capital projects cash flow perspective. Again, all of this is changing. If we did this meeting 3 weeks from now, we would have different numbers. If we did, 3 months from now, when we come back to you, in the fall, usually around the proposed budget timeframe, we'll also usually update this page once again. So that's basically the story of the capital projects cash flow. I'm going to pause there and then kick it over to Mr. Weldy, who's going to talk for a couple minutes about kind of debt levels, just to give you a sense of that, and then we'll open it up for questions. Chris?
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to provide a quick update on the township's outstanding debt, including our debt trends over the last 10 years. So during this 10-year period, it was the policy priority of the board, when possible, to reduce debt. Some of the ways this was accomplished was through periodic transfers from the general fund, periodic transfers from the sewer fund, and controlled CIP spending. The board also recognized the value of the township's AAA credit rating and endeavored to maintain this rating through its debt policies. So looking at it over the last 10 years, the outstanding debt. In 2010, we were at about $113 million in debt. For the years 14 through 2017, we averaged about $106,000 in debt. That's a decrease of about $7 million from 2010.
106 million, Chris.
Excuse me, $106 million. decrease of about $7 million from 2010. In 2018, we had no new borrowings, and as a result, the debt dropped to about $99 million, a decrease of another $7 million from the prior year. In 2019 and 20, we remained at about $99 million. And in 2021, the current year, again, we had no new borrowings and debt to date. Our debt is anticipated to be reduced to about $91 million at the end of this year. So over the past 10 years or so, we've seen a reduction in township debt of about $23 million to our current debt level of about $91 million, which is anticipated at the end of this year. As Eric mentioned, in 2022, we anticipate borrowing early in the calendar year to fund the 2022 CIP projects we'll be discussing tonight. And as you saw in Eric's cash flow projections, we project the need for approximately $9 million in additional borrowings. And the need for this $9 million could change depending on the amount approved for this year's, for the 2022 CIP, as well as the board's decision on how to spend the American Rescue Program funds. So that's a quick summary of our outstanding debt over the last 10 years and our current balance. With that, I'll send it back to Eric to wrap it up.
So I hope in a rough kind of 10, 12 minutes, whatever that was, that gives the board a sense from a financing side before you get into the nuts and bolts and hear from Paul about where projects are and what's coming up in terms of the dollars that are available, the dollars that could be available, and how that might impact the township's outstanding debt. So with that, I'll pause, turn back over to Commissioner Zeloff and entertain any questions from any board members that there might be.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Chris. And I think this is the right order in which to do things so we understand the context for the discussion to follow in terms of capital projects that we will consider for 2022. So with that, are there any members of the board who have any questions for Eric or Chris or Ernie from his prior comment? Seeing Commissioner Kramer.
How much of our debt will we be paying off in 2022, just as in the ordinary course of retiring debt?
That's roughly about 8.8 million, Commissioner Kramer. So again, if we were to borrow, say $10 million next year, we would generally have about $1 million of an increase in outstanding debt. If we were to borrow less than that, but that's kind of the running kind of churn or the attrition of debt as it's retired for the township right now.
And the second question I have is the ARP contributions. What are they allocated to? What categories?
So they would be allocated in one of a couple different ways, and I'll have asked Manager McNeely to kind of follow up on this as well. Is one, we can use it for certain stormwater and sewer projects. That's an explicit allowable expense related to ARP project funds. The other thing that the township can do, and this gets back to Township Manager McNeely's earlier point, is if you claim this as lost revenue, then you have the ability to use it for basically spending on something that is termed basically like a governmental service. So that could be an operating expense or a capital expense. So on the capital side, if the township were to be investing in its parks in some form or fashion, that would generally be an allowable ARP expense, at least as far as we understand all of these regulations right now. They're still in draft format. Hopefully they'll finalize in about the next 45 days. Ernie, do you have anything else to add, or do you think that summarizes things?
I think Eric's right on target. Again, as we claim lost revenue, it really becomes our discretion on how to use the monies in terms of operating or capital projects. The few things we can't do is we can't deposit it into one of our pension plans. We can't, as some places do, put it into a separate rainy day fund to set aside for some future years, but we have the ability to use it. And again, even though we're getting the 12.75 million in 2021, which we've already got in the bank, we don't have to allocate it all for 2022. We can wait and see how things play out with respect to 2021.
But the 1.5 million that we have listed 2021 has already been allocated.
So no, what Eric's showing here is simply the fact that knowing how much we've already spent through the 2-year borrowing that we've done, that we may need some money to finish projects that you've already approved for 2021 and then folding into 2022. So we're actually showing the 2.2 million in 22 and 1.5 million in 21. And not necessarily targeted at any one specific project or multiple projects because they've lost that restriction. They're kind of open to any of our CIP projects. Ultimately, we'll designate them for one or the other so that down the road when we get audited, we can show the feds where the money was spent. But it's just kind of plugging those holes in 21 and 22 at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner Courtney.
Thanks, Commissioner Zillow. First, I guess I have a question about how the lost revenue calculation works. I think I understand it, but I would love an explanation because my understanding is we projected a $4.5-ish million deficit at the end of 2019, and then we ended up with a $6.9 million deficit. So I'm surprised that if the deficit only grew by $2.5 million, we somehow are able to claim $12.5 million of lost revenue.
I can answer that, Commissioner Courtney. In terms of what we budgeted, that doesn't matter. What we're going to do is compare the 2019 results and the 2020 audited results. So if you recall for 2019, when we talked in May, we had a really good year revenue-wise. In 2020, we did not have a very good year revenue-wise general fund. So we had it was about a $5.9 million deficit for 2020. However, the formula that the federal government has for lost revenue is basically you take your base year, which for us is 2019. You add 4.1% onto that base year revenue, and then the difference between that inflated number minus what you had in 2020, that's your delta. Now that also includes not just the general fund, but also our major 2 utility funds, so sewer and solid waste, based upon our understanding of the regulations that they have right now. So while there wasn't a revenue change year over year with those, what that does, it makes that initial revenue number higher, meaning when you add 4.1%, it makes that number higher, meaning the delta becomes greater. So that final number will be on the 12.6 will be revised as we go forward. My hope is that we basically have that finalized by the end of July. My hope, obviously, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have the audit out. And then what we really need to do is go through the regulations, see if there's any changes when the federal government finalizes their interim regulations on this. But that's the reason how that revenue number becomes so much higher, is you're comparing for us a year that was very good to a 2020 year that was not very good at all. And then that 4.1% and those other variables really make that number escalate rather quickly.
We sort of got lucky in having a really good 2019.
Correct.
That's giving us maximum flexibility with these funds. That's great. I guess my next question is, we're allowed to distribute that 25 million over 6 years, right? We can spend it starting now up until 2026. So I guess that's about 4 million a year. Why are we not allocating more in these CIP projections right now?
Well, that's going to be up to the policy preference of the board as we go forward. The only other one thing I would say is the money has to be obligated or planned to be spent. How that is really defined, I haven't seen a great definition from the Treasury Department yet. I take that to mean, because I want to be conservative, is to mean obligated means like you have a contract in place for a capital project that you're at the end of 2024 that is going to be funded with ARP dollars, and then it's going to be finished, hopefully in the following year in 2025. it can't be just, oh, we're going to plan to spend it on this. It has to be, I think we're going to have to see how the final regulations come. And hopefully there's going to be more clarity around that, because there's been a lot of questions from people like me in my position about that. But in terms of how we spend the money over time, as Manager McNeely alluded to, and you can add on to my response on this, is it's going to depend on how the board also wants to proceed.
Do you have a sense of or a projection right now of what our deficit is going to be going forward?
Not
ignoring
yet.
The ARP funds. Last year was projected at like
ignoring the
7.5.
ARP funds. We had about, I think it was around a 7 million deficit. I'm sorry, I'm not obviously at home base here. I think maybe it was 7.3 budgeted for this year. I do anticipate as of right now that we're going to perform better than that, based upon some of the positive revenue performance that we talked about last month around real estate transfer taxes and also especially business taxes. At the end of July, we'll do our mid-year financial update, especially on the general fund. And at that point, we will have kind of our first look at 2021 projections for the board to consider.
Mr. McNeely, I noticed a couple times in your memo, you mentioned not imposing a tax increase. I don't see a category of ARP funds used to cover deficits. So maybe you could explain how we would do this without, how we would use ARP funds to cover a deficit.
It's simply that you are allowed to spend the ARP money on operating expenses. So in one sense, yeah, you could be covering a deficit if you're running one, but that's not against the rules. As long as you're spending the money for operating expenses that are general government expenses, it's a legitimate expense. So if the board chooses, you are able to say, we're going to capture a certain amount here for the general fund and have the general fund avoid running a deficit in whatever year, 21, 22, and therefore prolonging what we all have seen in multiple financial forecasts now, that a tax increase is very likely. We thought that would be in 22, 23, but with these funds, obviously you have the ability, depending upon how you use them, to perhaps defer that for several years.
Last question, do you have any sense of what the municipal cost index will be over the next year?
I do not.
I know these are sort of budget questions. It'd be great to, when we have our budget workshop, to understand those. Thank you, Commissioner Della.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Courtney. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments for Ernie, Eric, or Chris? Commissioner Sinai.
Thank you. Commissioner Della, thank you. Eric, just a quick question for you. So Chris pointed out that our debt level had fallen by about 12%, from I guess 112 million to 99 million, which is great. I recall that we also refinanced some of that debt to lower interest rates. And so, how much has our cost of debt gone down? It must have gone down by more than 10%.
Not quite sure I understand your
So
question,
we're paying interest and principal every year.
Yes.
And the interest component of that has gone down faster than the overall quantity of debt, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
what's our debt service? Yeah.
So you're asking how the debt service has changed, or how the outstanding debt has changed as a result of the refundings?
No. The outstanding debt has gone down from 112 million to 99 million. But our debt service presumably has gone down by more than 10%.
I can look that up. I can basically see like how much debt service was as a percentage of budget in 2010 and how much we're anticipating it to be this year. And then I'll write you back and copy the rest of the board on that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful. I think that's a useful way to think about debt capacity, right? Especially when we're still in a low interest rate world. Because, to a degree, how much we borrow, we just pay back, because it's you're paying back the principal, but the interest cost component is lower at this point in time. And we've refinanced a lot of that.
Yes, and the only other thing I would add is when you look at those percentages, just for the entire board to remember, obviously that's also subject to what the previous board's decisions were related to how large the operating budget should have been. So there's other factors, so you might not see a one-to-one kind of ratio that makes complete sense.
Right, it makes sense. Thank you very much. And Commissioner Zoloff, so I had a kind of a big picture question for Manager McNeely about just the allocation of categories in the CIP. Is this the appropriate time for that, or should I wait?
Allocation of the ARP funds?
No, just in terms of just in the CIP, proposed CIP, like how much is in each broad category.
I think we should get to that after we hear from our Public Works Director, who's going to present those.
Okay, then I will wait first.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinai. Any other board members with any comments, or rather not comments, but questions? Eric, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Excuse me, Rick. Rick, you're not here, so I didn't see your hand waving in the little square on my screen. Commissioner Churchill.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric, you can't leave yet.
I just want to make clear that our present debt is around 91 million, and that you're anticipating that we're going to retire about $8 million, and we're going to borrow between $8 and $9 million. So that said, we're going, if those projections work out, then our debt is still going to be like $92 million. Is that, am I right about that?
The way the cash flow is set up right now, Commissioner Churchill, you basically would have no change in the outstanding debt. So as Chris talked about, I think to be even more exact, I think he was saying 90 to 91 million, because I think the number is 90.5 if you get really specific in terms of where we think it'll be at the end of 2021. If I know we're planning to retire roughly 8.8 million in 2022. If we were to borrow that same exact amount, then you would basically be at the same level. So as you borrow more than 8.8, your total outstanding debt will increase.
Yes.
And if you borrow less than that, that outstanding debt will further decline. Does that make sense?
Sure. I just want to make sure, because even though it's not policy, I think that at least I feel most comfortable when our debt is under 100 million. So thank you.
Yes. And, based on where the board is right now, you're a good amount under that kind of Churchillian level.
Thank you.
Or we could call that the Churchill line. Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Eric, I would just want to make a comment on our debt level, and one of the bases for our prior decision making was that our debt service as a percent of our operating budget was high, as noted by rating agencies, as they were commenting on our AAA rating. And so that was part of the thinking on why we wanted to reduce our total debt level. The goal was to reduce the debt service as a percentage of our operating budget. Eric, I'm sure we've accomplished that to a large extent, and maybe that's data that you can also provide to us at a later Finance Committee meeting.
Yeah.
With that, any other members of the board have any questions? Thank you, Eric, for being with us, and for Chris. Of course, you're welcome to stay, Ernie. Thank you for your participation in that discussion. So why don't we now move to what is actually number 2 on our agenda, but we'll make it the third item, which is 2021 project status. So projects completed and projects that are underway. And so I'll call on our Public Works Director, Paul McElhenney.
Good evening. Your first exhibit that I would call your attention to is page 7 through 16 of your agenda that was handed out. What this is just a recap of what has occurred this year and what is occurring. And you'll see the first sections, the projects that are completed. I'm just going to touch on a few key items, just some highlights from the year of what's occurred. As Eric indicated earlier, we are going through spending a little bit faster this year. Even though it's COVID, we are going through a lot of projects. We are getting a lot done. Don't know if it's an influx of contractors wanting to catch up or what it may be, But we are getting a lot done. It is taxing on staff, but we're managing. That said, it's also been a very strange year in pricing. We've been surprised by some prices, such as our road paving and milling. That came in less than we had anticipated. We thought we would see an increase in that due to oil pricing and so forth, but yet other projects have reflected the current markets of material costs and so forth. So it's been a very weird or different year for us in the CIP. And in preparation of the CIP with staff and management, it's also been a little different in that a lot of 2021, 2020 projects were moved to 21, 22 has moved. So what you'll see this evening is that very few B projects for this year. A lot of what are A projects are the natural progression of either items from 2020 moved to 2022, or excuse me, yes, to 2022, or other projects that have moved up. But if I could just point out a couple highlights. One of the first things is under 4236, we did do our first road or traffic calming project this year. River Road received speed tables, speed pillows. That was our first traffic calming project under the new policy. That was completed. One of our major projects that has gone on for several years through the process of defining the project and working through the project was the energy savings program. And that project is coming to a conclusion. It has gone extremely well. We have a few more fixtures to do, some punch list items. With that project, we've already seen rebate checks from the utilities. Those monies are coming in. We are seeing savings in our bills already. So a very successful project in every sense. Went well with very few incidents. Couldn't have hoped for a better project and a better project team on that. That went extremely well and was, I would say, very much a success. And and well spent dollars in our CIP. You'll see a little further down under 4652, we were able to do two stream bank restoration projects this year, which helped gain us our credits towards our pollution reduction plan and our MS4. We'll talk about that a little bit later as we get into some of the A projects and what we have planned for later this year. Another big highlight, we spend a lot of money on infrastructure and our sanitary sewer repairs and stuff like that. You'll see under 4750, the Hollow Road Force Main replacement. That was a rather large project, very invasive into the community, but we have successfully completed that project. I'm going to just touch on some of the other items, but we'll go a little deeper when we start to go through the ABC list. But one of the big projects that's been going on this year and has gone well with all things considered because of the COVID and some of the challenges that we faced at the beginning of the year was the Pennswood Bridge 4204. I would encourage you to take a look. The bridge is gone. The new superstructure, the bridge structure itself is in place. And I would thank the colleges and the churches that are our neighbors on that project. They've worked really well with us to help make that a successful project. That is going extremely well. That's a highlight for this year. 4210, our rotomilling and paving, that'll be starting. We're looking at mid-July. Or early, probably mid to late July for that to start. Be about a 4-week project, 4 to 6 weeks, but we're hoping 4, talking with the contractor. So that's getting ready to get started. 4216, Rock Hill Road, Belmont Avenue, TSA improvement. That project is currently finishing designs. We have received some information from PennDOT or from the right-of-way team where they're coming out to assess our property so that we're having forward progress on that project. We are seeing movement on PennDOT at the PennDOT level, so that's very promising. One item that's another great item for this year was 4218. the intersection improvements at Spring Mill and Conshohocken State Road. As you know, many projects, funding was challenging. PennDOT had to pull funding or suspend funding for a lot of projects. This is one that they told us to keep working on, keep doing our preparations, and that should be going out to bid shortly, so that we could hopefully get a fall start, late fall start on this project. So that's good news. That was one project that stayed there. And if you've been through the intersection and you've got the challenge of people going straight that should be making rights, that'll be a big change. Project that's just getting started is the Manayunk Road Bridge. If you know where Gully Run Park is, where the Vanderveer post is at Conshohocken and Manayunk Road, there's a tiny little bridge there. That bridge will be closed, but we will be reopening late fall, October, November, with a brand new bridge in its place. So that's another project that we've been pursuing and is going extremely well. We also see is we ordered Penwin's new fire engine, and that came in this year. And for next year, there are actually 2 engines scheduled to be replaced in this CIP. So next year will be a very busy year with some costs associated for the fire company. Another highlight from the Parks Department is the Ashbridge Memorial Park Master Plan implementation. The bid awards June, and construction will be given this summer. So that's going well. That's a great highlight from the Parks Department. And also the Kenwood Heritage Trail Phase 2. The design's underway for the Bartmouth Trail headquarter improvement. So another great thing that's being done, and our Parks Department, Donna and Gina, are handling that, which makes my office so much happier because it gives us a little breathing room. Again, as I talked earlier, 4652 will touch a little bit more, but you'll see in this year's CIP, we're being a little bit more aggressive in our stormwater projects, and I'll point those out. We're going to be working on the design for the Remington Basin. West Mill Creek Park, we're working on the credit development and analysis of that. Glenraffin Creek Centennial Road, we're working on that, getting that ready for next year. We're also looking at the Penwin Park and also the one for the Rolling Hill Dam. So it is an aggressive plan for next year. Again, we are only being so aggressive with this one category because a lot of these we're hoping can combine and do as 1 or 2 contracts. And with the help and the aid of the Parks Department, because many of these fall under parks, that'll eliminate or help the Public Works Department with the management of those projects. That's the only one of the reasons we're being more aggressive. We have that aid over there. Because there's, as you know, you guys could give us $20 million budget or a $30 million budgets. There's only so much that we can design and manage during a given year. So we're cautious in what we put in and the levels that we put in. So with that, that's kind of some of the highlights of the year, what's going on, what we're seeing, and what we're doing. So if I'll turn this section back over to Commissioner Zeloff before we move on to the next section of this agenda item.
Thank you very much, Paul. By my count, there's 106 separate CIP projects that are currently underway by various departments in the township, and many of those underway with Public Works. So let's take a break here, or a moment here, I guess. Do any commissioners have any questions for Paul on projects completed in 20, expected to be completed in 20 and 21, and ones that are still being worked on at the moment? Seeing no questions.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I wanted to thank Mr. McElhaney for completing the Lodges in Pembroke project on behalf of my entire neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions. Commissioner Churchill, there you are.
I'm not taking it personally.
Please
Just
come in.
Quick question. Quick question. The pedestrian light at Haverford and Remington, has that been approved? What's the timeline?
That has been awarded. We've had pre-con materials are ordered. I have to get the actual start date, but that is well underway. That project's been awarded and should be completed within the next couple months. We are like everybody else experiencing difficulties in getting some materials. So
okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Churchill. So, Commissioner Courtney.
One quick one I just remembered. Under 4246, the Sustainability Infrastructure Program, your bullet says the EAC is preparing a sustainability study. Is that a reference to the upcoming draft greenhouse gas emissions plan that they're working on?
Yes, that's the entire sustainability monies. If you go into the 4246 in the ABC, you'll see that we reallocated the monies from this year and added more for next year. And that is so that what may come from the EAC or may come from the recommendation of the board. I know that, as you know, earlier this year, we talked about electric vehicles and whether those monies may be used for charging stations or something of that nature. So some of the verbiage in these is a general verbiage, but that's what it is. It's for if the board makes a decision to provide that infrastructure or anything of that nature.
And one other I remembered as well, under 4236, traffic network evaluation, there's ARD5, which is Ardmore Sign, Anderson Avenue Overpass. You know, this is a favorite of the North Ardmore Civic. It says construction plan for 2022, and they asked me on Monday, what are you doing?
We, as you know, we are working with the SEPTA folks with the raised platform. We are working with them to see what we can design in to try to move the sign up. Great. So that, and I don't know if you're aware, it was struck again today.
I got some pictures. Yes. Right. Yes. Thank you.
So there's a bullseye on that sign, unfortunately.
Moving it up would be great. Maybe making it out of something harder than trucks.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? All right. Seeing none, Paul, I think the next agenda item is the general CIP discussion items. And I think for board members, we want to, that's pages 18 through 31 in your packet. So that's the staff's proposed budget and plan for 22 through 27, along with the supplements, which are listed on pages 30 and 31. And then we're going to have Paul present that and have any questions that follow. And then we'll get to the biggie, which is 4236, traffic network evaluation, since there's so many items on that. So we'll get to that in sort of the next segment. So Paul, do you want to present the highlights, I guess, of the proposed proposed capital budget and plan for 22 through 27?
Correct. All right. So as I said earlier, we really don't have many B projects. And for those, just to refresh your memory, B's were those projects we were looking for some direction from the Board of Commissioners because we had new projects or something of that nature we felt needed to be included. You will see one of those later at the very end of the presentation.
Hey, Paul, I'm going to interrupt. Paul, can you get a little closer to your mic? We're having a little bit of challenging, and I left my hearing aid at home.
Thank you. Yeah.
How's that? I
much better.
Thank you.
I can't get any closer. I'm on top of my keyboard. So
all right, just stay close.
Are you trying to say I need to lose some weight so I can get closer? So that said, I see Andy shaking his head. Thank you, sir, for your support. overview, you'll see that as Eric pointed out, we're at $13.6 million in proposed A projects for this year. When we first went through this, we were upwards of almost $19 million. So this was a task, a heavy task. And we went down, as I noted, most of these are A projects because they've been deferred, they've been moved, and these are our recommendations at this time for your consideration. That said, I'll go through and give you just some highlights. As Commissioner Zoloff indicated, we do have a supplemental sheet which goes with some of these if you'd like to see what composes some of these and how we got to those totals. And with those supplements, I will point out some items that are near and dear to some of the commissioners or have been part of conversations held over the last couple of years during the workshops and the hearings. So a couple of the highlights that I would bring forward is number one, 4024 Marion Streetscape. For 2022, we're looking at phase one at this time, which is the reorganization of the island at Montgomery and Old Lancaster and the traffic signal for the fire department. So that's an item that has moved into our 2022. One of the reasons for that is because of the grant monies. And we do not wish to lose the grant money. So that's one of the highlights or one of the items that moved into the A. Again, going to 4204 Pennswood Bridge, rather large project, very insignificant dollars being spent by the township for the project, only 5% on the entire project, but it does take a lot of time to manage the project and have oversight of that project. Again, just bring it forward that we kept our level, our 4210, our rotomilling and road reconstruction at the $1.5 million level. As Eric indicated earlier, we do take liquid fuels money towards that when we get further into the year to help offset, and we do take monies given to us by the utilities for their contribution for paving, and some of that may offset this or help us do more lane miles. Earlier I touched on the Rock Hill Road intersection, the Spring Mill intersection. The next big item is 4236, and that is the township-wide traffic network. You'll see $2.2 million in that. Once we finish this part of the presentation, we will circle back to the actual supplement, just so I can touch on some items in that 4236, so that the commissioners have a better understanding of what is the larger projects that fall under that for 2022. If you go to page 21, you'll see 4405. This is the fire company facility projects. This is this year, you'll see we have $496,000 in repairs scheduled for that we would like to do for the fire companies. If you were to look at your supplement on page 30, you'll see what's being called out, and with that, you'll see that there's really nothing that's large or uncalled for or anything of that nature. It's all a combination of small projects that add up to that total. Much of this is deferred maintenance and stuff such as that. But you can see what makes up that $496,000 between the fire companies for their facility repairs. And my fingers are not working, or my pages don't want to turn, one or the other. So bear with me. Our next item that I bring to your attention is the this year we have 4459. Just a highlight or a project that we really think needs to be done is the basketball court reconstruction down in Penguin Park. It's been deferred for 3 or 4 cycles now. It's really becoming a issue, and we really recommend that moving forward this year. That's, $280,000, but we feel it's well worth it. The Ashbridge Memorial Park plan, for the masonry repairs on the main house is also in here for next year. Again, I'm just trying to touch on some other items that bring us to that 13.6. One large item that you'll see is if you go to page 23, 4508, which is the Ardmore Avenue Community Center. We spent a lot of time working with Anna and discussing what the timeline would be for a realistic plan. You'll see we've actually gone down a little bit for 2022. And the reason for that is the study needs to be done. And we don't think that the cash flow is as needed for 2022. So we've taken that number down a little bit. We've moved the other 300,000 into 2023. And that would be the board's, direction, whether they wanted to increase 2022, but we really don't think that we need more monies with the timeline to do the study and so forth. We think realistically, what we've allocated of the 100,000 would cover what we would need to do next year in the CIP in then doing the study in preparation for 2023, if it's the board's desire to move forward at that time. 4652, this is another item. This is the stormwater facilities management projects. This is one that I'd like to circle back to after we do the 4236 because it's rather large projects with a lot of money associated with it. So I'd like to circle back on the supplement of that one in a little bit. The next highlight or item is just wanted you to see on page 25, if you look at 4718 and 4719, you'll see that we have just over $500,000 of yearly expenditure. This money is part of I wanted so you understand where some of the sewer funds go. This helps with our infrastructure. This helps with our infiltration. This is something we do every year where we identify where we're having a lot of infiltration, and we do a lot of sewer lining in this area to help cut cost on the water management and the sewer bills for our residents. So this is one of those areas where our investment of this size really helps us cut the sewer bill down and keep our sewer rates without having increases. But as you can see, to run our sanitary sewer system for 2022, our expenditures are $2.7 million. A lot of this is just our maintenance and upkeep of our infrastructure. So a rather large fund, but a rather expensive operation to keep functioning. And again, you take into consideration those A projects that, I just highlighted some of them, we get to that $13.6 million. So that's kind of where we're at with your handout here. As I noted, I'd like to circle back to two others after we take questions and so forth, but I'll turn to Commissioner Zeloff for that.
Thank you very much, Paul. Unfortunately, your page numbers are one off from our page numbers. Just, I guess, to let everybody on the board know that's the case as you were following
along.
Sorry about
that. I'm using an earlier draft then.
Okay. So do board members have any questions for Paul on what he's gone over so far, keeping in mind that after we're going to come back to traffic improvements 4236 and stormwater 4652. Vice President Gambert.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Paul, I had questions on two of the projects you mentioned. The first one is 4024, the Marion Inwood streetscape improvements. I'm on the other end of the township. I really can't talk to it and how much it's needed. But one thing you had said was we moved it up because of the grant and we don't want to lose that. And I am all for if we can get money from elsewhere to pay for projects. That's something we should certainly be looking at. But in this case, I'm looking at it, we're talking of $50,000 grant on a $1.2 $4 million project. If I'm reading that right, which would be, you know, it's 3% of the project. It's such a small percentage of the project. If it's needed, then it's needed, and I'm all for it. But if we're moving it up just for that small grant, to me, that's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog. So if you could just kind of explain that a little more, I'd appreciate it.
Maybe I misspoke. We didn't quite move it up. It's been a project that's been being moved back. We didn't want to move it back any further. The $50,000 is a grant for phase one, which is $375,000. So it's $50,000 towards the $425,000 project. Phase two is completely different, and that would be all township funds. That has nothing to do with the grants. It's just several projects under one umbrella down in that area, or several phases.
But it's your opinion, your expert opinion, that if even without the grant, we should do this at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the key, there's several key items for that. Yes.
Okay. The other question I had was on 4246, which is a sustainability infrastructure program. And I objected to this at the time, not because I don't think we should be investing in sustainability. I think we absolutely should. But to me, we didn't have a project associated with it. This was just, we put money in here for something we want to do having to do with sustainability. And for me, that's not the right way to do our CIP. Do we have any more direction on how we think we should be using this $130,000 in 2022?
I can answer that.
Okay.
This year we have $100,000 budget, but we don't have a plan for how it's to be spent. There was some talk about electric charging stations here at the township building or at one of our other facilities. We did receive some numbers from Paul that we thought here would run around $120,000 if we did it this year. So therefore, when we reappropriated the 100, assuming we don't have a plan yet for 2021, we added a little bit of money to it, made it 130 for 2022, assuming that one of our first projects might be, based on the board's decision, be to put in some charging stations here at the building. Again, that's as far as we know in terms of an actual plan for use of the money.
So, and I know that we have a lot going on the sustainability front. I assume that to dig into the details on what that should look like, is that something we should hold off until the fall when maybe we have more direction, or is this something we should be kind of discussing in more detail at this point?
I think we'll certainly have a better idea in the fall once our sustainability manager position is filled, and we've had a chance to go a little further into the electric vehicle question. I think we'll have a better idea then on how we should spend that $100,000 this year or $130,000 next year.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Durbin.
Well, I have a very niggling but annoying ongoing question about business district signage. Have we made any progress on signage directing people to the Ardmore 1 parking garage? Because I know that there's no money in it this year, but I think it's small but important.
It's really not a question of money, Commissioner Durbin. In fact, we've probably placed an additional 5 or 6 P signs in the last year since the garage opened. Our real big problem is there's no place to put a sign, and there's no place to put a big sign, which is what we really need. We're prohibited from putting anything on the traffic signals at Cricket and Lancaster, and between the trees and street lights and everything else at Cricket and Cricket Terrace, there simply isn't any room. We were turned down on our request to put a nice big sign on the side of 1 Ardmore Place directing people up Cricket Terrace to the garage. So we're kind of searching for options there.
Well, I'm hoping we can find something because, you know, it's underutilized because a P sign does not tell people where it is or what it is. And it's, you know, not on the road. It's a little bit up the road. So
they are P signs with arrows, but you're right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Durbin. Other commissioners with questions for Paul McElhenney? Commissioner Kramer.
I just want to make sure that I understand correctly that if something is listed as a C project, such as 4092 or 4500, but money is allocated for future years, in those years it would be an A project.
Let me turn to 4500 just so I have a point of reference. So
That's the Connolly Site Master.
Right. What they are is it's a placeholder. As you know, this is a planning document. The only thing that would be committed at the end of any given year is what is approved at the December board meeting with the CIP. So anything shown in an out year is a proposed placeholder. Those items could move forward if need be, if grants became available or something of that nature. And there are projects that have been moved several times into the out years because of funding, lack of grants, and so forth. So things that are shown in the out years are placeholders with intention, but there is no commitment at this time for any of that.
Is there any possibility of moving the Connolly Site Master Plan up in time? Or is there a reason why it's pushed out to 2023?
If I am correct, I spoke to Donna Heller, the director of public works, parks. I wouldn't want to demote her in such a way. The director of parks, and this was a realistic because of plans and design where she felt that she would need monies for that this is where the money would be needed this time frame. If I'm incorrect, I'm sure that she can respond and let us know, but I'm 99% sure this is the time frame that we discussed, that she felt she would need monies for that project due to planning and right away and stuff like that.
I guess my second question is with 4092, the City Avenue Transportation Service Area Improvement Program. What is that? And what is anticipated for 2024?
Most of those projects, the monies that you see and so forth are projects that are being planned by the City Avenue Special Service Districts for the improvements along City Avenue. There are numerous projects that deal with traffic and the traffic network, the on and off ramps there, different projects throughout that. The specific projects are still being debated and designed and so forth by the City Avenue Special Service District. This is one of the CIP projects that actually we have an external contributor in the sense of our CIP plan instead of a director or commissioner of management. This is more of their long-term planning and how it affects us. And the other thing that with if I could just jump back to your former question, my understanding is we need a lease from Norfolk Southern that's being worked on, and to make a connection to the 4500 trail. So that's one of the other things that Director Heller is working on that helped influence the decision on those monies.
Can I just add one sentence?
President Bernheim, yes.
Yeah, just to add to what Mr. McAfee just said, Commissioner Kramer. Also, Chris Leswing, our head of building and planning, along with our township engineer, has been working with Norfolk Southern. So keep fingers crossed that we may be able then to enter into some form of lease agreement, which would be able to give us access to that entire area there. And Commissioner McComb and Grimes, myself, we walked the area not too long ago, and it would be just a wonderful amenity. And for those who are interested in that skate park, there's a perfect area in that location if we're able to do it for consideration there. So we're going to push on that, and my wish list is we get that, and all of a sudden we skyrocket that to an A.
A little foreshadowing of what's to come tonight. Next is Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you. I have a question about 4459, which is renovations in Pinwin Park. One of it may be technical, but I know that this work was going to be divided up between Public Works and the Park and Recreation Department. Am I correct about that? Is some of Donna Heller's budget going to pay for this item?
Yes. Yes, you are correct. There's some of this will be done through Parks and Rec and so forth. Yes, you are correct.
There's also, I think, the major concern or component is stormwater management along Yarmouth Road. There's really a gully wash. Is that going to be addressed in this money?
I don't think it's this. It's not this project that you're talking about. That's one of the MS4 projects. A little bit different. Different CIP project to get you to the same spot.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You, Commissioner Courtney.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoll. I wanted to follow up on one of Commissioner Kramer's questions about the C designation for a project. You talk about what it means to be a C project. Is it possible for a C to ever get upgraded to a B, or at some point do Cs just get dropped out of the plan altogether?
No. So if I can give some background, 2008, newly elected commissioner was appointed to the ad hoc CIP committee and had to restructure. Yeah, it was I had to restructure with then the director of public works. So we came up with the nomenclature of A, B, and C to help make it easier for these discussions. A's were like the projects we recommend this year, but a lot of A projects are your yearly projects, your rotomilling, the stormwater management projects like your sewer lining and all. You open your door every year cost. So you have your constant A's. Then your B's are ones that either have been suggested by commissioners, have come in through civics, have now were C's, and now are being considered B's because of timing, because of funding, because of need, those type of things. So those projects then become B's and become consideration for the board because they may not have risen to a level where we feel that they're necessary at this point. They may be better as wanted or needed, so we'll ask those. And C's, they don't just disappear. I will tell you that there's to give you a prime example, 4452, Royal Recreation Area. That has been on here since 2008, and it just moves along. It's a placeholder so that we recognize that at some point that may have viability as a project. So we do look at every project. Is it now viable? Is it now relevant? Is it now its time?
Thank you for that explanation. The project I have in mind in particular is 4072, the Shoffle Green project in Ardmore. This is something I heard about my first week as a commissioner and have been reminded of consistently ever since. And I've noticed in all of our CIPs, it just keeps moving in lockstep, out 1 year, out 1 year, out 1 year. Earlier this week at the North Ardmore Civic, our Director of Building and Planning communicated the Ardmore Master Plan is predicting would be done, at the end of 2023. I think rather than continuing to move this one out, we might try to target it with the timing of that master plan, since I suspect this will be, but I'll save that for later. Thank you.
My only question to you, Commissioner, would be, they were first a couple quick comments. My time on involved with the CIP and so forth. The vision for the plaza has changed several times, but nothing has been concrete as to what should be done or will be done, and what the needs are there. If it is your desire, then there has to be planning done for that. And with that, we would then incorporate what the design would be, those expenses, and where that fell in the CIP and so forth. So, but as I said, I can count at least 2, if not 3 different design iterations or thoughts for that area. So
Thank you.
That's why it hasn't disappeared. It's just been moved because it hasn't progressed to the point where it has moved up.
Great, thank you. Other commissioners with questions? Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Paul, I have a question about 4095, the Public Works operational needs. And one of the, I'm okay with it for sure. I just have a question about the definition, the DEP permit compliance upgrades is in a category of other things that look much more tangible. Can you just describe what the compliance upgrades are? Are those physical upgrades or like software upgrades?
No, those that you see, we don't do IT and software here.
Not yet, anyway.
We're nuts and bolts, so that's actual physical.
Until robots take over, right?
Well, hopefully they may, but no, this is things that we need to do physically at the Kegel complex, the county line. What this does is lets us do a lot of those little projects that we need monies for.
Oh, great. Thank you.
All right. Paul, I have one question. Under 4405, fire company facilities. By far the biggest item on there is an engine room overhead door replacement at $200,000. That just seems like an extraordinary amount for an overhead door. I did see that the Mill Creek pump station overhead door was in the budget at $35,000. So I guess the door we're talking about for the fire company is bigger, but is it 5 times bigger?
Well, you have to understand, it's not just a single door, it's the doors at Gladwin. I'm not sure how many total doors, but it's also very different than what we are getting at Mill Creek and very different than what's at Gladwin now. What these are currently, even your own garage door at home goes up and over if you have a garage door at home. These are doors that are made to be opened, that they accordion, they disappear, so that if there's a power failure, if there's a failure with the mechanism, they are able to manually open these doors. The roll-up doors are too heavy to get up. So this way, if there's an issue, they are able to get the fire trucks out. So over the upcoming years, you'll probably see progression throughout all the fire companies, if possible, space-wise, to change these style of doors so that there's no issue with exiting the buildings during emergency responses.
All right, thanks for that explanation. So why don't we now move on to the two jobs that you wanted to spend a little more time on, 4652, which is stormwater facilities and detailed on page 31, and then 4236, which is traffic network evaluation, which is 37 projects and 10 or 15 pages long.
So 4652, the stormwater management. So I just wanted to circle back a little bit on that. As you know, we have our pollution reduction plan and our MS4. And the last couple of years, we've been reserved and pulled projects back because of our CIP and financial limitations the last year. So if you turn to your supplement, and you'll see it's under 4652. As I noted earlier, we're being aggressive this year in our projects that we're proposing. You'll see we have one in Mill Creek Park, Centennial Road at Mary Woodersford Road, the Penguin Park, that is the one that Commissioner Churchill was questioning, and also the Remington Basin. So those four are quite a lot of money to be spent on stormwater, but as we spoke earlier, one of the designations for the Recovery Act money is your stormwater management, your stormwater projects. So it does correlate very nicely. Our hopes are that we will be able to, and we will look at this more in depth as we put together the bid packages, whether this gets packaged as bid one, bid all, bid as individual projects. We'll decide, or we'll discuss how we feel what'll yield us the best pricing and so forth. And also having them grouped that way will make it much easier to manage, because then we can have really one project manager overseeing a project, even though it may be divided and so forth. Plus, as I commented earlier, our assistance from the Parks Department, because most of these are in parks, with the exception of the Centennial Road, and Donna and her staff are phenomenal in helping manage these projects and working with us and coming to our department for assistance only when we really need it. So this is allowing us to, I don't want to say farm out the project to them, but it helps us immensely. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at that. And you're looking at almost $1.5 million in stormwater projects here. My math may be a little off because I'm trying to calculate it as we speak and continue speaking. The rest of that is minor stuff. These are our normal every year expenditures, like our dam reports and maintenance. We do own several dams. We have to do maintenance, and this is where my staff and the engineering staff bill the time to make those repairs and those type of things. The majority of this year, the 1.6 million, the majority of that is the 4MS4 PRP projects. So I wanted to point that out, that yes, this is aggressive, but again, a lot of this will be handled by the Parks Department, which will help the Public Works Department immensely. So that was just why I wanted to bring the stormwater up. And this will get us closer to meeting our requirements of our permit.
Seeing no questions, Paul, do you want to move on to, excuse me? O'Neill.
Thank you so much. Paul, thank you. I appreciate your answers earlier today in my emails. And I had expressed in my note to Mr. McElhinney that I believe that 4 new projects for next year regarding MS4 compliance on the pollution reduction plan is a bit aggressive, and I understand the reasons behind that. However, if you look at the 3 projects that have been completed here in the township, that is the Remington Road Basin, actually it would be Hareton Road, Wynwood Valley Park, and Shortridge. These are still yes, they're technically completed as far as DEP is concerned. However, there are ongoing maintenance issues with these projects. And I believe that we could spend a portion of any one of these 4 that have been outlined just to make the investment of the other 3 projects as sound as they are meant to be in order to confirm and secure the credits moving forward. I guess my question, Paul, is what's the, I can't recall from the permit, do we have until 2025 to secure our credits? And if there's a way to ensure that we get the first 3 really spot on and secure in a way that's, one of the 3, we're pretty far from where it needs to be, and I really hesitate to move forward on them. So I would love your insight there and whether you may be flexible in terms of at least delaying maybe the West Mill Creek Park for the year, or just delaying it. I know that we're probably in design by now, just to make sure that we have the manpower to get the 3 that we have completed with respect to the rock formations, the new plantings, and other basic maintenance needs.
I'll start on this one, Paul.
Oh, sure.
Saying that we're being aggressive here is true, but we're really under the gun to complete our PRP plan. We only have until 2023 to complete our PRP plan.
Okay.
So we kind of took a year off because of the COVID and our budget constraints, and so that's why we're being aggressive here, because we need to get these projects done to satisfy the DEP and our PRP plan. If we got maintenance issues with any of the projects that have been completed, but that's not a CIP project anyway. If it's maintenance, that's it may be something that's still under warranty that we need to enforce, or if it's just pure maintenance, then, you know, that's operating and not really CIP anyway.
Yes.
And
Yes,
those two of those projects do have 2 years left on the warranty, and it's just a matter of making phone calls and identifying. So, and things have been ordered because plannings weren't established when storms came in. The plannings hadn't established themselves. These are all normal touch-ups and things that need to be done with projects like this. If we hadn't had some of the storms we had, we may have not had any of the issues that we did.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'll reserve my other concerns in the operating budget with respect to maintenance and plantings and overgrowth and so forth. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Seeing no other questions on that job, Paul, do you want to move to 4236, which has many projects for traffic improvement and pedestrian safety?
4236. So this is a rather large.
Yes, if I could, but for those here, it's page 32 through all the way through to page. Thank you. It's page 49.
So I just wanted to highlight this because this is the traffic network evaluation, and this comprises a lot of our expense for the year. But there are a lot of projects in here that have been discussed for numerous years and so forth. I'll just touch on a couple. Just the first page, your Green Light Go. These are the grants that we received from PennDOT for doing upgrades. These are where my staff gets the money to put in red light cameras, lights that help, not that monitor you for going through red lights, that help the lights change when the traffic changes and there's queuing and so forth. That's where a lot of this money comes from. Some of this money had been, or the state money had been put on hold. This was a program that had been affected by the COVID. We're starting to see funds released again with that. You walk through it, and just to give you an example, like VL2 and VL3, this is the money that our electric department needs to keep upgrading and keeping our traffic signals moving along. And this is where, because they are capital assets, we take the money from there to buy the products and we bill our labor against such things. But if I may, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And one item that I wanted to bring to your attention was VL8. So VL8, as I noted earlier, this is our traffic calming category. As I noted earlier, we did our first traffic calming, which was the River Road speed pillows. Along with that, earlier this year, the board approved several other traffic calming projects throughout the township. That said, there is still design work to be done, installation work to be done. If you would give me one moment, if I may. So I'm bringing up two items on my computer. One nice thing about being remote here in my office. So we had the River Road construction. We are looking at the pavement markings on Rose Glen for this year, the Mount Pleasant Road markings, pavement markings and rumble strips, the Gypsy Lane, the 4 speed humps there. So our estimated expenses for the rest of the year for those 4 projects, we're estimating somewhere between $125,000 to $140,000. So actually 148 to 170, depending on what our total costs come in at and so forth. There's also been a request for another 6 speed humps on Latches Lane that's being reviewed by traffic safety, and then would go before the traffic calming committee. That has an estimated expenditure of $30,000 to $40,000 for the installation and design. So if I took the 4 projects that I just spoke of, and I add in the Latches Lane project, if it's approved before the end of the year, I am at potential expenditures of $178,000 to $210,000. I call this to your attention for 2 reasons. One is that for this year, traffic calming, I had budgeted $100,000. For next year, you'll see that I have allocated in 2022 $50,000. What we had identified earlier this year was that we had $100,000 in SL1, small infrastructure budget, and that we were going to borrow money or use money from that to help offset traffic calming. At that time, none of us had any inkling as to what the multitude would be. So we will be over budget this year. We will be over double. So just making the board aware of those costs that are associated with these calming measures, and also point out that such things as the rumble strips and the pavement markings and those things will be adding into my yearly budget for maintenance, because I will either have to have staff renew those every year or every other year, and also or contract them out. So I just wanted to educate the board on that so that they understand where I guess question and consequence, or not consequence, but action reaction, that they seem minor, but they do pack a punch. So we will be over budget this year in traffic calming. And again, as I noted, I've allocated $50,000 for next year. I don't know if that's the right number, but we will be evaluating that more depending on what kind of requests and commentary I get through the rest of the summer and fall from the Board of Commissioners and the traffic safety, the traffic calming committee. So that was more just for educational purposes, if I may. But I wanted to get to some of the larger items so that you're aware of where they stand and what's going on. So at the heart of Commissioner Courtney, you'll see ARD 5. Yes, I caught your attention. On page 37, I think it is, you'll see that there we have monies for your sign. Don't know what we're going to be doing with the Ardmore sign yet, but there are monies scheduled. There it is for you. If I could bring your attention to, let's see, trying to pick out those that make smiles. I don't think I've seen Commissioner Courtney smile since he's been on this board, but I got one tonight. BC3. This has been a point of discussion for Commissioner McComb, Commissioner Kramer. This has been an ongoing project. We've striped the road, and we are moving forward with the design and installation, hopefully starting late fall, start modifying the intersection there at Belmont Avenue and Levering Mill, with the long-term goal of the new sidewalk being placed in along Levering Mill there. The sidewalk, what had triggered this entire project from start to finish. Granted, the only monies that are being asked to be committed are the monies to complete the intersection at this time, and that's what monies are being proposed for 2022. Next that you'll see is BM1. This is the Bryn Mawr County Line Road corridor. This is the monies to put in the new light at Montrose and Bryn Mawr Avenue, and also
Montrose and County Line Road.
County Line, yes. Well, I'm Montrose and County Line. Excuse me.
Okay.
I'm trying to move your ward around a little bit. But this is that intersection. There's been a lot of design and a lot of coordination between Commissioner Zeloff, the Radnor Commissioner, PennDOT, but hopefully, we'll get everything worked out, and this will be monies for that. There's also other improvements, Flash and Beacon near Lancaster Avenue, Lancaster County Line improvement, the intersection improvements. So that's what this monies that you see here for 2022 are. It's a very, probably 5 different components to 7 that make up that entire project that we are working on over the next couple of years. GD1, where on my screen is Commissioner Grimes? This is the underpass at at Mill Creek and River Road. This is the underpass project that we had to push last year. This is those improvements to help the traveling public get through there when it's raining so that it doesn't flood and cars don't disappear. So that had been moved. That is scheduled for 2022 at this time. If we could jump ahead, where a good bit of our expenses for this year also coming up or proposed. If I may, give me one moment. I'm going to go to WIN-7, WIN-7. This is the West Wynwood Road, Old Wynwood Road, Bellator County Line Road section of Wynwood Road. This is something that, as you'll see, we have monies in here. There is a public meeting tomorrow night on this. We've had several meetings with PennDOT. Most, if not, hopefully, most of these monies will not be needed or won't be supplied by the township. It is the hope that PennDOT will be covering a lot of the improvements in that area. So that's good news. So I know Commissioner Durbin has worked diligently for her constituents during her time on the board for these improvements in this area. So hopefully we will be seeing something later this year in this corridor and will help our CIP. So I'm touching on a little bit for everybody here. I'm trying to keep everybody happy. So, but also, all kidding aside, just so that we understand where our expenditures are at. So you will see VIL1. This is the sidewalk up at Stoneley on County Line Road. This project has been approved, but due to the COVID and so forth, this project has been pushed back because of trying to coordinate meetings with the stakeholders involved, and then the wrinkle with the new middle school and all that. But Commissioner Gavin has been working with us. We've been working with Radnor. We've been working with Villanova University and Stoneley to try to figure this sidewalk out and get it constructed. So as you can see, we moved Commissioner Gavin. We moved money to keep design and discussion for next year because we don't have design yet. Most of it would fall into 2023 realistically if we were to get a design and everything and so forth. So that project has moved in only because the issues that we've faced with COVID. And then if you go to VIL3, this is a sidewalk project on Montgomery Avenue on the west side from Claremont Road to the new middle school. Last year, this was discussed that we would look at having this designed in 2021 and have it ready to be bid for 2022 so that this sidewalk would be in place with the opening of the new middle school. We've kept that as shown so that this sidewalk would be one of those items for 2022. At the same time, you'll see VIL4, which is the sidewalk on Montgomery Avenue on the east side from Spruce to the new middle school to the new traffic light. Again, this was, last year we identified money in 2021 to start working on design and 2022 for the installation to be ready for the new middle school. And we've kept it as it was shown last year in the CIP. So those sidewalks have stayed pretty much the same. The other big change, not change, but one of the items up in that area that we've been carrying is the VIL 6, which is the new intersection or the changes at the intersection of Montgomery Avenue and North Spring Mill Road. That during the development planning, during building and planning, one of the conditions of approval was that the school district would help contribute to that intersection with the terms and conditions that we would have to have the intersection improvements done by the time the school opened for their contribution for us to receive their share. We have begun work on that project in the way of our preliminary designs. Commissioner Gavin has been gracious in reaching out to some of the affected neighbors so that we can gain access to the property, just so that we can survey and get an idea of where right-of-ways are and so forth. But we are currently working on the design, and the goal would be to have that done next year. Have all those improvements made, same time frame. The school district will be doing their improvements at their main entrance with their traffic signal. As you know, and thank you, Commissioner Gavin, for the patience with all the infrastructure that's going on. You and I receive numerous calls daily about the gas work, the water work, and all that. But the hope is that the two intersections are complete, all the paving's complete at the end of next summer before the school opens. So that's
the Upper Marion work also, Paul.
But the Upper Marion part, late fall for Hanging Rock, and Matson Ford, they are done with the gas work on Matson Ford. I can't speak to the full PennDOT project. I'm being told November for Hanging Rock. So, and I'm not allowed to work on their projects. I got to stay focused on ours. So that's one of the big projects going on, but we're trying to get everything done so that it's done. That Montgomery Avenue opens, nobody's inconvenienced, and we are done with any more water work, pipe work, anything of that nature. Now, if I could just jump ahead to one item that we would be touching on in the next topic, because it's here at the end, you'll see that we have $100,000 listed under SL1. This is a small infrastructure project. Currently, we don't have anything listed for 2022. Normally, this is something that Mr. Duncan sends out an email for to ask for your small projects. We haven't had the time to do that yet. We will be doing that in short order. So if you're going to have small projects that you will want considered, we'll be sending out an email asking for those projects so that we have time to look at those, formulate those, and have them ready for the fall first hearing on the CIP. So that way we'll have some, if there's projects, we'll be able to bring them forward to you. But as I noted, there's nothing identified against those funds at this time, but we will be reaching out. So that's 4236.
Thank you very much, Paul. So do board members have any questions on 4236 network traffic safety and pedestrian safety? Commissioner McCollum.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinai. Paul, first I want to thank you for a very detailed presentation. It's obvious that we have a lot of projects underway and you are up to speed on all of them, and have, it's like being a first-year law student being peppered with questions by a bunch of lawyers, and so I thank you for that. My question's a general one, which is, given that we're emerging from COVID and some of these projects have been put on hold, you see any speed bumps for your department and the township as we emerge in terms of staffing, contracting, bidding, things like that? Because we have there's a lot coming out of COVID, and we have the addition of American Rescue Plan funds that may generate new projects and more expenditure. So this is your chance to speak to us and say, we're at capacity, we have more capacity. Where do you stand on that?
I would say that what we're presenting puts us at capacity. There could be room because some projects do get delayed, some move, but I would caution, like I had mentioned earlier, you turned and said, I have $20 million or we're giving you $30 million to work with, I would say no. It'd be very hard because of just trying to manage and oversight. We would be then reaching out to the design team to supply staff, and it would be hard to keep track of everything. We usually try to fall in that $10 to $12 million range. This year, with the extra stormwater projects, we're going above that. But as I explained earlier, we need to do so, and we also have the help of the Parks Department with that. So that helps with that. Do I see speed bumps? What's concerning is we've put together these estimated costs. As you know, just from your daily purchase of household goods and everything, prices are escalating. Some are decreasing. We have people that are holding prices for 3 days, 7 days. So we sometimes don't know what the bids are going to be. It's a little hard, but we're doing our best to try to have an idea. We're running outside of the CIP, just purchasing in general. If I could just, our fleet vehicles and so forth, some of them we're being told we have a 2-week window to order, and they're not sure when that 2-week window will be. Just, we're running into very odd buying times, but we're working our way through it, and we have daily discussions on where we stand. So. But I do appreciate you asking what our capacity is.
Great, thank you, Commissioner McCollum. Other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Thank you, Paul, for this. This is great. It's great detail. I have a question about MS1, which is on page 39. It's the only MS. And it's really more of a question of process. So by way of background, this is a study of potential safety improvements at the intersection of Montgomery Avenue, where Brookway and Bowman both come into Montgomery. There was yet another accident there last week. This was kind of precipitated because one of the residents there is disabled, and the danger of that intersection makes it particularly difficult for that resident. So the way this is done, and it's done for several of the other items here, is that the study, the preliminary study is booked out in 2024 when construction's booked out. And I guess my question is, why wouldn't you do the relatively inexpensive kind of scoping study earlier, right, 2022, for the 20,000 part, and then based on that, we would be able to have a more precise budget in the out years for the actual construction. Because that 20,000 may say there's nothing feasible to do, right? It's purely investigatory, and of course, it's somewhat pressing.
Well, we have some preliminary results or discussions with PennDOT that are, for lack of a better term, off the record. Sitting in a room having discussions, and there's issues with that. So we didn't spend a ton of money doing a study on it, but put that project aside. With many of the studies where it comes to intersections and roadway, we don't want to do them too far in advance because the way PennDOT changes and so forth. We have intersections that have been looked at 4 or 5 times because of how many times it's changed over the years and so forth. So the matter of being strategic in spending our money.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Mm-hmm. Other commissioners with questions on this section? And seeing none from the 2 commissioners who are not with us tonight, but not with us physically. We're then going to move on to the last section of our packet, which starts on page 48 and goes to the end, which is page 53, includes some potential new projects as well as a review of a sidewalk review, some sidewalk project review. Paul, do you want to go forward then with this last section?
Sure. You'll see item A was the review of the small infrastructure projects. As I noted, we will be reaching out to the board to see if you have any projects you'd like for consideration for our review. As I mentioned earlier, we really don't have any B projects this year, with the exception of one that is a B project. per se. And what we're having is an issue. We're experiencing flooding on River Road. There's an infrastructure issue down there. There was, back in 2012, there was a study done, a proposal made for basically three different projects down there. What we're looking at is the project to do the reconstruction of the roadway piping, and the water runoff from the roadway. We're proposing that $300,000 be allocated in the CIP for 2022. The hope is that two approaches. One, we're soliciting prices to try to clear the infrastructure of the obstructions to get it open, to allow us time to work on the roadway and schedule the project and bid normally to do those changes that we would propose for 2022, or start the actual project this year. If the pricing comes back to that it's a third of the project or whatever, that it's really spending good money after bid, then what we're going to propose is to try to get the project started this year and handle it much as we've done some of the other emergency projects this year. So we're going to have an expenditure on River Road. The question is it going to be a two-part expenditure of clearing a blockage and then later doing the infrastructure repair, or is it going to be one part with just doing the infrastructure? Those are the things we're working on. As Eric had said earlier, in 3 weeks from now, this may have been a different presentation because we'd have more information, but we are actively pursuing how we're going to respond to this issue, and have been. We've worked on design, we've updated designs, we're doing all that as we speak. So that is something for more of a FYI as to what's going on. Now, new projects for consideration. These are projects that have been sent in to us by commissioners that we need guidance on. And one is the River Road, the evaluation and creation of a quiet zone. Commissioner Grimes has received emails from a resident asking the township to consider moving forward with creating a quiet zone along the river with Norfolk Southern, which our estimated cost to do so is about $500,000. We show it in 2027. I guess more so, is this a project that the board wishes to have in the CIP and have considered and have staff continue to look to and work on and so forth for future? So that's why we've included this. We need some discussions since it has come from Commissioner. It is in response to one resident we know at this time. I don't know if the commissioners had time to vet it with the civic and other shareholders, stakeholders in this. So this is there for discussion and more input from the board and from the commissioner himself. So that is the River Road evaluation. Another item that's in here, and it's just shown in the out years, and it was touched on a little bit earlier by Commissioner Bernheim, and was the skate park. And again, this is just a placeholder with an estimated cost. There's really, there's no design in place. This is an estimated cost. So we're just showing this and asking, is this something that the board wants to have as a placeholder in the CIP, and so forth. So if we can get some commentary, it doesn't need to be tonight, but just in general, is this something the board supports and we should keep in the CIP and continue staff's efforts? Bala Kinwood, C3. This is a new crosswalk that was brought to us by one of the commissioners. And what this is a new crosswalk, new ADA compliant ramps over on Remark near West Princeton. This is near the elementary school or the middle school. but this is the estimated cost. We show this in 2022 as a project. Looking for yay, nay, any commentary, any, objection to, but that is what we're showing at this time. Another item that we have placed in here is C4, and that is a baseball field down at Youngsford Road near Lafayette Road in Schuylkill. There's been a lot of emails back and forth internally as to that project. This is, again, a placeholder with estimated cost. Just reaffirming that this is something that is to be carried in the CIP. And this would be, again, listed for now as a C project until, if it were to be carried, unless we were told differently. So there are the projects that that were given to us for consideration. I don't know if Commissioner Zoff, you would like to take commentary on those, or you'd wait till I went further through on the next.
I think, Paul, I think now's a good time to ask for Commissioner questions and comments on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. You've recommended the River Road culvert improvements, and then commissioners have proposed River Road quiet zone, a skate park, a new crosswalk in Ballackinwood, and a baseball field in Gladwin, not far from River Road. So not that there's a theme. And so would any commissioners like to speak to any of these? We don't have to necessarily do them in any particular order. Commissioner Grimes, it probably makes sense to start with you.
Thank you. I'm the beneficiary of several of these potential projects in Ward 2. So with respect to the culvert, I'm not going to ask Director McElhenney any questions now, but we'll have some questions later. As I believe he said, we have received many complaints about drainage issues over in the area where this is proposed. I think that I'll be looking for some more information, but since this is a recommended project, I'll withhold on that, since the other items here, for now, the other items are asking for commissioner input. The quiet zone, I think right now there are $500,000 of funds allocated for 2027, and I think that's about right now. The reason I say that is because, as Paul said, we have received inquiries and a desire for a quiet zone from particularly one neighbor, but I've heard that there are others interested in this. It would benefit that area. There's also concern about the safety of the crossing at Waverly. On the other hand, I do believe that this is a project that ought to have some sort of significant government match in terms of funding if it were to move forward. I think this is a very heavy potential cost. So my sense is that I have no objection of keeping it proposed 2027, with the caveat that if we're able to identify some other funding sources for this, that we revisit this at some point in the future. In terms of the skate park, I am in favor of the concept of a skate park. I think the sort of the devil is in the detail of where it would be located. Our open space plan had identified some space potentially, I think, under I-76. Wherever that would be, I think that once that, the key is to where we could locate it. And then certainly right now the funding is allocated, the initial funding for 2023. So it'll take us time to find a place, but in concept, I'm okay. The baseball field. This location is adjacent to the Richie Ashburn Field. So there is already a sort of tradition of baseball in that corner of the township. It's also adjacent to Stony Lane Swim Club, which has seasonal use, and presumably fields would have more of a use. This location, the township owns most of the property, and some additional property offhand, I think it was maybe a little less than an acre, was There was a home there that the township demolished and had a lien. Now that portion is under private ownership. So we would have to acquire it one way or another. But right now what's in the budget is $30,000 for next year for design and inspection. I believe that's appropriate. I think that property is in a way too valuable that even that's just the township owned property, not to look at some use if it will help alleviate the pressure on the athletic field elsewhere. I think again that the real detail will be whether we can actually locate a baseball field there if it's practical to do so, or some other athletic field, and then how we can do that and deal with it's a Youngsford Road and Lafayette, it's one lane in each direction. The key will be parking and finding a way to do it that's fair to the neighbors and that doesn't overburden that section of the township, which is, again, the potential is there, but there's not a lot of room for traffic and parking. But I think the funding in here is probably about right at this point. Was that
that covers the five? You spoke about four of them.
Yes, right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, Commissioner Zella. Quick question about the River Road wide zone. I looked at the description, but I don't really see what it is referring to or what the money would be spent on. It looks like there's a possibility of developing quiet zone so that the Norfolk Southern doesn't have to sound its horn, but what exactly are we buying?
Commissioner, what it really involves is installing gates on Waverly Road at the crossing, because anywhere where a railroad comes through where there are not gates stopping traffic, they have to sound the horn. So with the gates, then you could designate a quiet zone through there, in which case then the trains would not sound the horn when they go through.
Thanks. One comment too, like Commissioner Grimes, I think the skate park is a promising idea. The devil's in the details, but as President Burnham said, there are talks underway with Norfolk Southern. I know that Mr. Leswing has had those discussions and continues to have them. So that sounds like a promising option.
Yeah. Other commissioners? Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on the skate park. I know that we had said that, and I want to thank the constituents for sending us the stock emails to let us know about that. We appreciate that information. And we are all abreast of it now. So thank you. The other piece on that is I would hope that as we look at this project, that while Mr. President outlined a potential spot, that we do not limit what we're looking at in the areas that we look at in these potential areas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevenson. Other commissioners with questions or comments? So we'll keep going around. Vice President Cameron.
Thank you, Commissioner Zella. Just want to talk quickly about the baseball field and kind of back up what Commissioner Grimes said. I think as we've been looking for additional field space throughout the whole middle school fields process that I think everyone's well aware of, this came up. This seems like a very promising opportunity to create, whether it is for the new middle school or whether it's not for the new middle school. It is, as Commissioner Grimes said, in a place where there already is a baseball field. It is underutilized property. It is right by the highway with institutional neighbors. It would seem to make a lot of sense if this can be, if this can be done here to do the baseball field. So I certainly support that as well. And also on the skate park, kind of echoing what my colleague said, there seems to be a relatively small but very passionate group who's supportive of it. I think it would be wonderful. I think the funding for this makes a lot of sense where the township would spend some money in investigating it, but a lot of the fundraising would be on those who are really interested in it, and certainly working with the township to help them raise funding for this, because I think it would be a great amenity for those who are really interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Going down, Commissioner Sinai. We'll go with Commissioner Sinai, then Commissioner O'Neill.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zilloff. So to start with the baseball field, I support this. I think if one thing we've learned is that Meantime, we have the opportunity to do, as a township land assembly, to create a publicly owned parcel that is large enough to accommodate a baseball field, even if we don't immediately put a field there. Like that is really useful to have, in our arrow in our quiver. So we should move ahead with the early stages of that with alacrity. In the skate park, I also support this. I would support you starting this as soon as we have potential sites identified. It falls in the category of amenities. Relatively few of the things we do are actually net new amenities for the township. Funding will be an issue, of course, but I don't see a great difference between a skate park or pickleball or even baseball, which we are contemplating fully funding ourselves, right? If they are amenities that a portion of the township really would make use of, we should kind of devote our pro rata, allocation of resources. So hopefully, I look forward to the board doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinai. Commissioner O'Neill.
Oh, thank you very much. Just going down the list first on the quiet zone. This is something that I have looked at for sections of Bryn Mawr and this goes back to 2017 with Brian McGuire and I kind of looked into this. It is expensive, extremely expensive. I don't think that matching is allowed in this, but we'll definitely look more into that. I would think that as we move forward, and that I don't know whether or not the qualifier for being on River Road at Waverly is any more or less important than, say, sections of Marion or Haverford and whatnot. The fact that they don't cut across any of the roads or all bridges, that may be a disqualifier there, in which case full support. But if it turns out that there are other areas of the township that would qualify, I might want to reconsider the 2027 timeframe and maybe think about, are there other ways we can get engineers to be a little more sensitive to non-commercial areas as they're going through. So that's what I would say about that one. The skate park, I think it's a great idea. I think that it taps a new sort of group of, I'm thinking of little kids, in particular number of little girls and their parents who have reached out to me with fun interest in this. It's been fun to see that. I would just my worry is that of safety, and I would want to make sure that we are doing all we can to put in certain requirements for safety. Helmets are a must, things of that nature, to avoid any serious problems with whatever it is that we end up building. And with respect to the baseball field, full disclosure, my family and I have been members of Stony Lane for about a decade. That is a popular field that we park on a couple times a year, and we work with Donna to mow it for our, various events a few times a year. We would want to, I think, probably reconcile how we end up sharing parking during those events, or maybe it's a scheduling issue. But I think the timing is good, and it is flat, and it's a good space to build. So the other question I had pertains to the sidewalk replacement versus the small infrastructure project line. Are we saying this? Are we adding small infrastructure projects to the 100, or the sidewalk replacement on Commissioner Sinai's committee blending, or how will that work?
Small infrastructure is something that the board decided to budget a couple of years back, and we plug in a number, and as Paul said, we solicit projects from commissioners for small infrastructure projects. They might be a sidewalk. They're going to be a very small section of sidewalk. They might be a crosswalk. They might be some other minor safety improvement. And as Paul also noted, in this past year, we've spent most of the small infrastructure money on traffic calming. So we kind of have two buckets for traffic calming. So these small projects are ones that just simply don't fit into some kind of the larger project aspect that the ad hoc sidewalk committee is looking at.
Great. Okay, that was my thinking too. I wanted to just confirm that. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. I do want to note that this workshop is not the last opportunity for commissioners to propose projects. This is a very good opportunity, but not the last one. There's finance committees between now and the time we consider a capital budget that's proposed by our manager for approval. So with that sort of station break, I'll turn to Commissioner Court.
Thank you, Commissioner Zoloff. I want to echo some of the sentiments around the skate park. I too think this would be a great idea, and I agree with Commissioner Sinai that it's something that I think is worthy of receiving a fair amount of township funding. My one concern about a skate park is that it, by definition, is fully paved concrete, and I would hope that any site that we find for it is one that already is paved, or at least it does not have trees or green on it already. I'm not familiar with the locations already mentioned. And to Commissioner Stevenson on the stock emails, I hope you clicked on the Instagram links because they were quite good. And then lastly, with regard to the baseball field, I just want to express some gratitude to Vice President Gavrin for all the work he's done on the middle school project in general, and in particular, as of late, with regard to our athletic field situation. I hope that we find an alternative to the current site. And I think adding a baseball field here, assuming that we're not just swapping one set of trees for another, is a great idea. And I really do appreciate the work that Commissioner Gavrin has done to push it.
Thank you. Commissioner Kramer.
Yes, I wanted to speak first and foremost to the crosswalk at across Bryn Mawr Avenue at West Princeton. This crosswalk was part of the BC Middle School Pedestrian Mobility Plan that was prepared in 2018. And this was listed as a secondary project after the others were completed. The others have now been completed. This crosswalk was recommended by traffic safety. And I'm sure one of the reasons for that is when I went up to inspect the area, I discovered that West Princeton exits out onto Bryn Mawr Avenue opposite the elementary school and middle school. And there are no sidewalks on the east side of Bryn Mawr Avenue there. So when the kids, and there are about 30 kids who come up West Princeton Avenue to go to the schools every day, when they reach the corner of that very busy street, Bryn Mawr Avenue, where people are dropping off kids and buses are coming through and there's a ton of traffic there and it's backed up all the time. The kids have to cross in the middle of the road with no sidewalks where they can access the other existing crosswalks. And that's why traffic safety supported having this additional crosswalk. It's a small amount of money to pay for the safety of children for an elementary school and a middle school, and particularly when our CIP is including millions of dollars to provide safe sidewalks in the western part of the township. We should be protecting the children throughout our township. And I think that this is something that we should absolutely do. And I also question whether or not maybe we could knock $1 off the estimated price of $50,000 and put it in as a small infrastructure project and just get it done. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner Durbin.
I just wanted to add my support for looking at the feasibility of the skate park. I think it will add to safety in a lot of places if there's a dedicated place for these kids that's designed for them. Because I've seen them on walls in other places that are not designed for it, and other people are there not expecting skateboards. And, you know, it's a sport that's been around, it's going to be around, and let's find a safe place for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Durbin. Anybody else? I'll offer a few comments. I would say that, wow, $500,000 for gates at the crossing of the railroad seems extraordinary. But a matching approach is a logical way to consider this going forward. As to a skate park, I'm in support of pursuing it. I would say we, as Commissioner Stevenson has suggested, we should consider several locations, not that we would land on several, but we should consider several and land on one, at least as a start. And we don't necessarily have to start with a massive skate park. Commissioner Courtney suggests that we should perhaps be, you know, he didn't say it, but in recognizing that a skate park is, you know, all impervious, maybe we should to consider one that's not massive in size. And then I would say, as to a baseball field, having more fields is something that we are continually pursuing, and land acquisition, as Commissioner Sinai said, particularly if this is a small one, makes sense. However, $2.3 million for a baseball field is not quite Citizens Bank Park, but getting close. And so it is Gladwin, but nevertheless, it is taxpayer money. And so if we can come up with a baseball field that is more like the cost of Ashburn Field, which was a tree dump in the beginning, that was converted into a field, I think that's a better way to go. And so that I think covers the proposed new projects. And Paul, I think the sidewalk projects only section, is that just for our information? Is there any comments you wanted to make on that?
Just two, there's actually two items, Commissioner. There's one, the sidewalks, and as Manager McNeely pointed out earlier, there is a committee working on the sidewalk policy.
Yes, the chair is among us.
Right, so working on that. Just wanted to point out that we do have sidewalks in the CIP, and that over the next 6 years, we have slated about $2.4 million slated sidewalks in different forms throughout the years. In our recommendation for next year, we have $865,000 towards sidewalks. 2023, we're looking at $1,200,000 in sidewalks, just so that the board's aware that we do have a lot of expenditures in sidewalks already. It's more for educational purposes. That was it.
Thank you for highlighting that.
I have one other item, Commissioner.
Yes, you want to speak to 4211 sidewalk replacement?
Yes. So sidewalks seem to be very, very popular in our conversation this evening. 4211, that is the township sidewalk CIP project that we do the replacement of sidewalks that are lifted or damaged by right-of-way trees. Several weeks ago, we ran into questions about this, and we solicited commentary from Gil High as to some questions, direction, clarification, et cetera, for our education to make sure we as staff were enforcing properly and different things. Mr. High indicated and questioned why that we had this as part of the CIP and why we were doing this as part of the policy. He had concerns as to whether we should really be doing this as a township, that we currently have residents make replacements and repairs to all sidewalks with the exception of this. And he had concerns about liability and so forth with this. So I wanted to bring it to the board's attention to see if first the board would take the position of we're just going to continue with this in the CIP. Thank you very much. Or no, Director, we would like to get a little more information on this and have this as a discussion item in the future with maybe Gil's, with a statement from Gil himself. So I'm looking for some direction. Currently, we do have it programmed into our CIP like we normally do. But as I noted, there were concerns raised by our solicitor as to why we continue to have this program and so forth.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments on that item, that last item that Paul brought up, which has been asked about, or the solicitor raised a question about? Or should we wait to hear from our solicitor as to hear his thoughts directly as to the sidewalk replacement category? Commissioner McCollum?
I've gotten a little bit involved in the issue, and I think it raises enough issues that I think that we would benefit from getting Solicitor High's input before you go forward.
Right, that sounds right to me. Any other commissioners have any comments on that? Okay, Commissioner Sinai, as chair of the Ad Hoc Sidewalk Committee, do you have anything you'd like to bring up, or just note the data that our Public Works directors provided on sidewalk improvements and projects that are incorporated into this proposed 6-year CIP?
Yeah, all I can say is that, on the sidewalk committee, I think we're very cognizant that the cost per linear foot of sidewalk can be pretty high, and it kind of is on our agenda to figure out what the largest value added sidewalks would be, and then we will bring it to the board for the board's appropriate role is to allocate, figure out how much, if any, money to allocate. So I think that can move along, kind of orthogonally to what we have here, and when we get to that point in the process, we'll discuss it.
Okay. Orthogonally, I can figure that one out. So let's see. At this point, then, do any commissioners have any further comments? I think we've had lots of time to ask questions, and we've made comments on it, particularly in the last section with proposed new projects. Any commissioners with any comments on specific projects or what we've covered tonight?
Thank you, Commissioner Zell. I just have one, and maybe it's a comment, and maybe it's a question directed at Manager McNeely. And that's an observation that we have a lot of things in our CIP, and one of those sections is categorized as service to people. And if I were to look at last year's approved CIP, what we had budgeted for this year for in the category of services to people, which are things like parks and I think what our residents view as kind of the affirmative amenities, as opposed to the basic blocking and tackling, running a township, like having sewer pipes that work, stuff like that, right? Is that line item for 2022 went from about 4.3 million down to 1. And some of that is that some things got shifted out, like Connolly master plan was $2 million that got shifted out, so it's really maybe 2.1 down to 1.4. But even with that, I guess my question is how are those decisions made, right? Because what a large part of it is just pushing off parks and rec improvements or new amenities off to future out years, as opposed to accelerating and doing them now. And for another $1 million in that category, you're effectively doubling the number of new amenities coming soon for residents in the township. And so that was my question. I didn't quite understand kind of how that kind of got moved around and whittled down to the number that we saw.
I think, Commissioner, when we make those sort of staff decisions to slide something out, it's not because it's not considered a priority. In most cases, it's because it's not a project that's ready to go. It's a project that we may need right of way. It's a project that we may need to finish other tasks before it can happen. It may be a project that we're anticipating and waiting for grant funding for. So it's really a combination of things as to why something might move. And our categories, services to people, I mean, this is a historical way we've broken down the CIP budget. I could argue that things in the administration category that involve libraries and other things are also services to people. It's just the way we historically have broke down the CIP. There's no magic to it. This board could decide you'd rather break it down and categorize things differently, but it's just historical process there.
Yeah, the point absolutely taken, and it's a convenient way of organizing it, right? Because and I think it remains a convenient way of organizing it. Because I didn't, all I meant to say was that category was the one that kind of encapsulated what we think conceptually of as being, absent your library's example, which really is an operating thing. The capital items that fall in the amenity category. And so, and this is leaving aside the fire trucks on parade. They're amenities as well, right? So, but I guess the question then becomes, as we think about this as a board, if it were important to say a commission that some of these things happen sooner, is it because there was COVID and things slowed down for things outside of our control, or we have a certain amount of bandwidth within the township and we get through projects within the bandwidth? Like how would you categorize what drives the timing of something that was originally scheduled for 2022 last year and is now pushed out to 23, 24, when?
And you just added several of the reasons why some of it has slid. COVID certainly had a role. Projects that aren't ready had a role. The bandwidth, I mean, as Paul said, $13.6 million or whatever we've added here tonight with other projects kind of gets right there. I mean, there's only so many projects that you can handle. And of course, it's easier to do one $6 million project than it is to do 100 projects that make up $6 million.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Thank you, Commissioner Zella.
Thank you, Commissioner Sinai. Other questions or, well, really other comments? Commissioner Kramer.
I just wanted to remind Commissioner Zella that you were going to make some comments regarding the Bryn Mawr community.
Commissioner Kramer, I'm going to make a few comments coming up. Thank you. Other comments from commissioners on tonight's process? Seeing none, we're about to wrap up. So we'll hear from our manager with next steps in a moment. What Commissioner Kramer was referring to were discussion that she and I had with Eldernet recently with regard to their wish to move the food pantry into the Bryn Mawr Community Center. Right now it's in a small building that the township actually does not own, but occupies, and that's where the food pantry is located. And if Eldernet were to do that, they would like to move their offices to the second floor of the Bryn Mawr Community Center, a floor that is in reasonably good condition, but needs some improvements in order to be appropriate for office use. And so that was looked at some years ago when the Bryn Mawr Community Center was being considered as a potential affordable housing site. For many reasons, it did not make sense to do that. So it probably does make sense to improve the second floor of that building for office use. And so that information was pursued, but is not ready for primetime discussion tonight, but can be ready for primetime discussion at a future Finance Committee meeting. The third floor of the Bryn Mawr Community Center is not at all close to being usable and is a different potential project altogether. And so that I expect will be something that will come forward to a Finance Committee at some time when there's sometime in the fall when there's better information. So with that, I think we've had a very productive meeting tonight, and I'm going to ask our manager if he would outline the next steps for our capital improvement plan process. And then Dan has any closing comments, we can do that, and we can wrap up before 9:30.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next steps are really for staff to work on these projects, refine the numbers over the summer, and as we come back in the fall, to be prepared to introduce a CIP document that is more like the beige book that you adopted for the current year. Staff will work on cash flow. We'll work on look on projections for spending in the current year, and come back in the fall with a lot more detail and information. Thank you for your comments and your input tonight. I think they're helpful. If I were to summarize the new project, recommended projects, I would say I heard tonight that you favor all of the new projects that and recommended projects that we recommended or listed here. And in terms of favoring them, also where we sort of slotted them in terms of timing. If I heard that right, if not, then please correct me, but that would be my summary.
Thank you, Ernie. I'll just, before I turn it back to you, President Bernheim, I want to thank particularly Paul McElhenney, because I did speak with him today, and excuse me?
Paul was signaling to speak.
Before I wrap up, Paul, yes,
Thanks.
please go ahead.
Commissioner Zoloff, if I may. Commissioner Sinai, just to follow up a little bit more on the conversation that you were holding with the manager, I understand that what you see here are township funds in there. If you look at that, the entire for that project with grants and rec fees is 4.3 million. So what you're seeing tonight is our monies, not all the outside monies. Just so that could be a little misleading.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So I want to thank Paul because he has spent a great deal of time with his staff in preparing a very detailed document. I mean, this capital budget workshop, there's an unusual amount of staff time that is necessary in order to have this for us. And there's also a lot of information that's not here that will eventually go into our capital budget. And one of the things we're not seeing tonight is all the other financial sources, because a lot of these projects have other sources of county, state, federal money, utility money, and many sources of grants that make these projects the huge projects that they can be. The Pennswood Bridge is in here at $170,000, but that translates into a $3.4 million project of mostly PennDOT money. But it takes Public Works time that far in excess of our 5% share of the cost to work with the contractor, to work with PennDOT, to work with the surrounding property owners who have construction easements that outweigh the township's small contribution to the project. So there are many, many large projects that our staff spends a lot of time on. And I think tonight's one of the most important nights that we spend on how we spend taxpayer money. And I think it was a productive meeting tonight. But most importantly, I want to thank our staff for their work. It is an ambitious capital plan. I mean, the biggest number on here is $104 million of township money in this 6-year capital plan. And what we don't see is all the other financial sources that make this up. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it over to our president.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zeloff. No surprise, job well done. And also, I know some input, other members of the Finance Committee, Vice President Gavin and Commissioner McComb. And certainly would be remiss, Paul, not to acknowledge, obviously, a lot of work you and your staff has done, along with our CFO, who had to drop off, Eric Traub, and Chris Weldy, who's still here, and of course, our manager sitting to her right. Yeah, I agree with you. Very productive evening, but we still have we've got some ways to go before we end up making decisions by the end of the year. And as indicated, between now and then, commissioners who have other concepts that they want to bring forth, that opportunity will be afforded for them to do so. We'll also have the opportunity to hear from members of the public of what they like, dislike, or any other thoughts that they have. And as indicated, we're in the process of work on sidewalks with an ad hoc committee chaired by Commissioner Sinai, affordable housing, an ad hoc committee chaired by Commissioner Stevenson, and this goes on and on. We're going to get input from all of these committees so that we can make some informed decisions and also give staff the guidance as we bring this, bring this forward. And then one last comment, Commissioner Sinai, I also chuckle when I see service to the people. In my view, these are all service to the people. From my other colleagues in the legal world, whenever somebody says, oh, that's a self-serving question, I always hope every question I ask is self-serving. So in any event, I see that. And I think that it's just the name that's been given out there for what we do. And it does, assist the process by breaking this up. So with that, we have beaten the 9:30 deadline set by Commissioner Zeloff. That probably doesn't give us enough time to debate the Ben Simmons issue. So unless anybody else has any other matters that they wish to bring forth, I will say thank you all for your hard work this evening and have a good night. We are adjourned.
Night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.